Today, for Women's History Month, I wanted to talk about someone who was relentless and fearless. She parachuted behind enemy lines, led a 7,000-member resistance, and became the Gestapo's worst nightmare. She had a bounty of 5 million francs put on her head, but it didn't matter. She could not be stopped. This is the story of Nancy Wake, also known as the White Mouse. Nancy was born in Wellington, New Zealand in 1912. She moved to Australia very shortly thereafter, but she was of Maori and European descent. When she was 16, she ran away from home and worked as a nurse. However, she got a small inheritance when one of her aunts died, and she decided that it was time to go to Europe. She made a stop in New York City in the United States first, and then she went to London and began training as a journalist. In the 1930s, she found herself in Paris and was traveling around Europe, following different news stories, and she unfortunately was witnessing firsthand the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi movement. In 1935, she found her stories taking her to Vienna and Berlin, where she witnessed several horrific attacks on people who were Jewish. This sort of violent behavior really did spark something in her, and she felt determined to fight fascism however she could. In 1937, while she was working, she met a wealthy French industrialist named Henri Fioca. She married him in November of 1939, and they settled in Marseille, France. However, very shortly thereafter, the Germans invaded, and Nancy quickly volunteered to become an ambulance driver to help the war effort. Unfortunately, France fell in 1940, and she very, very quickly joined the resistance movement against the Nazis. Sitting it out was never an option for her. She said, "I don't see why we women should just wave our men a proud goodbye and then knit them baklavias." She was ready to stand up for what was right. Nancy's husband proudly stood by her side as she became very prominent within the resistance movement. They worked together to move a large number of Allied servicemen and Jewish refugees from France into neutral Spain to escape the Germans. Nancy also worked as a courier and a spy for the resistance. She would smuggle messages, weapons, and sometimes even people across Nazi-controlled territory. The Gestapo knew something about her, but they could not figure out who she was for the longest time. In fact, she was nicknamed the White Mouse because she constantly slipped through their traps. As for her brazenness, Nancy said, "A little powder and a little drink on the way, and I'd pass German posts, wink, and say, 'Do you want to search me?' And so she was right there in front of their faces, but they could never catch her. The Gestapo underestimated her because she was a woman, and they paid for it. She gave them so many headaches and thwarted them so many times that she had a 5 million franc bounty on her head, one of the largest in the entire war. In 1942, her network was betrayed, and she had no choice but to flee France. Her husband decided to stay behind to help the people who were remaining, and unfortunately, she later found out after the war that he had been captured, tortured, and executed by the Gestapo for refusing to give her up. She didn't find out about it until after the war ended, and of course she blamed herself, but he died a hero. Once Nancy escaped France, she ended up in Britain and joined the Special Operations Executive and was trained in several programs. In April of 1944, the SOE decided that it was time to go behind enemy lines. She was picked as one of a 3-person team to parachute into France and basically be a liaison between the resistance members in London and in France and kind of get everything organized to fight the Nazis from within. In total, she was in charge of about 7,000 resistance fighters to take on the Nazis' guerrilla warfare style. In her role, she destroyed bridges, sabotaged supply lines, and coordinated attacks on German convoys. And during one raid, she personally killed a Nazi guard with her bare hands to prevent him from raising an alarm. Her team was highly effective. They destroyed several Nazi outposts, and on one occasion, they inflicted more than 1,400 casualties on the Nazis with very few resources at their disposal. Under her leadership, and with all of the spying that she did, the Maquis were able to cripple the Nazi operations in France, which basically paved the way for the Allies to come in and liberate the country. Despite how much danger she put herself in, she was never caught. Even though she was at the top of the most wanted list, even though her name was out there everywhere, she never was captured. After the war ended, she received many honors for what she had done, becoming one of the most decorated women of World War II. From Great Britain, she was awarded the George Medal. From the United States, a Medal of Freedom, and from France, the Medal of Resistance, and 3 times the Croix de Guerre. When the war ended, she decided to stay on with British intelligence and became attached to the embassies at Paris and Prague. She did eventually remarry, and she and her husband spent the next 40 years of their lives between Australia and England. After he passed away, she decided that she was going to take care of herself financially by selling her medals. She said there was no point in keeping them. I'll probably go to hell and they'd melt anyway. She made one final move to England, and she stayed there until her death in 2011 at age 98. Nancy Wake was a living nightmare for Nazis. She defied both gender norms and enemy forces, and she proved that women can be fierce, cunning, and dangerous, no matter the situation. Her bravery and defiance to fascism made her one of the most feared and effective resistance fighters of the entire war. She fought with grit and ferocity, and she refused to be broken, even after losing her husband. Nancy Wake didn't just fight fascism. She won against it. And we can win too. Keep fighting.